A 3-month-old baby girl disappears from a locked hospital nursery in 24 minutes. No witnesses. No screams. No struggle. Just an empty bassinet where Sofia Chen should have been sleeping. The woman who took her walked past 6 nurses, 3 security cameras and 2 locked doors. She wore scrubs. She carried a clipboard. She smiled at a janitor on her way out. And then she vanished, taking an infant with 2 different colored eyes into a void that would swallow her whole for 2 decades. By the time anyone realized what happened, Sofia Chen was already crossing state lines in the arms of a stranger. This isn't a story about a child who died. This is about a girl who lived an entire life as someone else, going to school, making friends, posting selfies on Instagram, while her real family searched for a ghost. 20 years later, her brother was scrolling through his phone on his birthday. He typed 7 letters into a search bar. And he found her. This is the story of the girl who was stolen in broad daylight, and the impossible moment that brought her back from the dead. Before we dive deep into one of the most shocking solved cold cases in recent history, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel brings you the most gripping true crime stories every week, and your support keeps us going. Also, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. This case spans from Seattle to Vancouver, and I want to know where our global community is tuning in from. Now, let's go back to November 14, 1995. The day everything changed. David and May Chen had been trying to have another child for 6 years. 2 miscarriages. 1 devastating late-term loss at 7 months. Fertility treatments that drained their savings and left May emotionally shattered. By 1994, they'd almost given up hope. Their son Eric was 7 years old, quiet and thoughtful, the kind of kid who asked gentle questions about where babies went when they didn't make it. May struggled to answer him. David threw himself into his work as a software engineer at Microsoft, trying to outrun the grief that followed them everywhere. And then in early 1995, May got pregnant again. This time the pregnancy held. Sofia arrived 3 weeks premature on August 20, 1995, 5 pounds, 2 ounces, lungs strong, eyes open and alert. The delivery was complicated. May needed an emergency C-section. But when the nurses placed Sofia in her arms for the first time, May wept so hard she couldn't speak. David called her their miracle baby. Sofia had something unique, something that made her unmistakably, undeniably hers. Heterochromia iridum. Her left eye was a deep, warm brown. Her right eye was an icy blue-green like winter sea glass. The pediatrician explained it was a rare genetic condition, completely harmless. It occurred in less than 1% of the population. She's going to stand out, the doctor said, smiling. She's going to be unforgettable. He had no idea how true that would become. The Chens spent 3 days in Seattle General Hospital, a mid-sized facility in the city's Capitol Hill neighborhood. May was recovering from surgery, weak but euphoric. David shuttled back and forth between the hospital and their home in Beacon Hill, bringing Eric to visit, managing logistics, fielding calls from excited relatives. Eric was thrilled to finally be a big brother. He pressed his face against the nursery glass, waving at Sofia. He asked when she could come home so he could teach her things. David told him soon. Just a few more days. On November 14th, Sofia was exactly 12 weeks old, healthy, thriving, ready to be discharged. May was napping in her recovery room, still sore from the C-section. David had taken Eric down to the hospital cafeteria for lunch. Sofia was in the nursery with 5 other newborns, bassinets lined up in 2 neat rows, visible through large glass windows that faced the main hallway. Nurses checked on them every 20 minutes. Security cameras monitored the entrances. The maternity ward was on the 4th floor, accessible only by elevator or a locked stairwell. It should have been safe. But someone was already inside. Someone who had been watching. Waiting. Planning. Let me walk you through the 24 minutes that destroyed a family. 1:45 p.m., May Chen, exhausted from a restless night, falls asleep in room 438. A nurse checks on her, dims the lights, closes the door quietly. Down the hall, Sofia is sleeping peacefully in her bassinet, labeled with a small card. Chen, baby girl, Dobie, August 20, 95. 1:50 p.m., David Chen takes Eric downstairs to the cafeteria. Eric wants chicken nuggets. David orders a sandwich. They sit by the window overlooking the hospital's front lawn. It's a gray Seattle afternoon, drizzling. Normal. 2:10 p.m., Nurse Linda Ortiz conducts her routine check of the nursery. 6 babies. All sleeping. Everything in order. Sofia's vitals are good. Linda makes a note on her clipboard and moves on to check another room. She'll come back at 2:30 for the next feeding rotation. 2:15 p.m. Security footage captures a woman entering the maternity ward through the main elevator. She's wearing pale blue scrubs, the standard uniform for nurses at Seattle General. A surgical mask covers the lower half of her face. She's holding a clipboard and wearing a hospital badge clipped to her chest, though the angle of the camera makes the photo on the badge impossible to see clearly. She walks with confidence. Not rushed. Not nervous. She nods at a passing orderly. He nods back. Nobody questions her. 2:18 p.m. The woman enters the nursery. She's alone. She moves directly to Sofia's bassinet, the third one from the door. She doesn't hesitate. Doesn't check the other babies. She picks Sofia up gently, cradles her, wraps her in a pink hospital blanket. Sofia doesn't cry. The woman tucks the baby against her chest, adjusts the blanket to obscure Sofia's face and walks out. The entire interaction takes 90 seconds. 2:23 p.m. A different camera, this one positioned in the east stairwell, captures the woman descending 4 flights of stairs. She's still holding the bundle. She moves quickly now. By the time she reaches the ground floor, she's almost jogging. 2:25 p.m. She exits through a side door that leads to a staff parking lot. The door is supposed to be locked, accessible only with a badge. But hospital maintenance records later show that the electronic lock had been malfunctioning for 3 days. Anyone could push it open from the inside. The woman disappears into the parking lot. No cameras cover this area. It's a blind spot. Security had been requesting additional cameras for months, but budget cuts delayed installation. She's gone. And so is Sofia Chen. 2:47 p.m. Nurse Linda Ortiz returns to the nursery for the scheduled 2:30 feeding. She's running 17 minutes late because she had to help another nurse with a difficult 4 insertion. She enters the nursery, looks down at Sofia's bassinet. Empty. Linda freezes. Her brain stutters, trying to process what she's seeing. She checks the chart clipped to the bassinet. Chen baby girl. She looks around the room. Maybe another nurse took Sofia for a procedure? But there's no note. No update on the chart. Linda's heart starts pounding. She runs into the hallway. Did someone take the Chen baby? A confused nurse shakes her head. What? The Chen baby. She's not in her bassinet. Within 30 seconds, the ward erupts into chaos. 2:50 p.m., hospital-wide lockdown initiated. Every exit sealed. Staff conduct room-by-room searches. Someone runs to wake Mei Chen. May's scream echoes through the entire 4th floor. David Chen hears it from the cafeteria 3 floors below. He starts running. Eric, holding his half-eaten chicken nuggets, starts crying because he doesn't understand why his dad just sprinted away. By 3 p.m., Seattle Police Department is on scene. By 3:15, the FBI is notified. By the time the sun sets on November 14, 1995, Sofia Chen is 200 miles away, and the woman who took her has vanished like smoke. Within 2 hours, Sofia's face was on every news station in the Pacific Northwest. The FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team, CARD, took over the case immediately. These were specialists trained for exactly this scenario. They descended on Seattle General Hospital like a tactical unit, interviewing every single person who'd been in the building that afternoon. Doctors, nurses, janitors, visitors, patients, security guards. Nobody recognized the woman in scrubs. Agents pulled surveillance footage from every camera in the hospital, 23 cameras total. They isolated the clearest images of the suspect. She was approximately 5'6", slim build, late 20s to mid-30s. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. The surgical mask obscured her face, but her eyes were visible, dark, focused, calm. Too calm. Behavioral analysts immediately noted it. This wasn't a panicked, impulsive act. This was planned. Methodical. The suspect knew the hospital layout. She knew the nursery schedule. She knew about the broken door lock. She'd studied the security camera blind spots. The FBI expanded the search beyond the hospital. They pulled traffic camera footage from every major road within a 10-mile radius. They checked bus stations, train terminals, airports. They issued an Amber Alert. Though Sofia was too young to meet the technical criteria, she couldn't be seen by the public in a way that would generate tips. Still, tips flooded in. A woman matching the description was spotted at a Greyhound station in Tacoma. Agents raced there. False alarm. The woman was a traveling nurse with a newborn nephew. Another caller reported seeing a suspicious woman at a rest stop near Olympia, acting nervously with a baby. Agents investigated. The woman was a stressed-out new mother whose infant wouldn't stop crying. A psychic called claiming she'd had a vision of Sofia near water, possibly Lake Washington. The FBI entertained it briefly, they always did in child abduction cases, but it led nowhere. Detectives discovered the hospital badge the suspect wore was a forgery. A good one. Professional-grade lamination, accurate hospital logo, a blurry stock photo where a real ID photo should be. The scrubs were standard issue, available at any medical supply store in the city. No way to trace them. The suspect's behavior suggested healthcare familiarity. She moved through the hospital like someone who belonged there. Analysts theorized she might be a current or former healthcare worker. Maybe a nurse who'd lost a child. Maybe someone suffering from pseudocyesis, false pregnancy, who snapped. Detectives compiled a list of every woman in the Seattle metro area who'd recently suffered a miscarriage, stillbirth, or infant loss. It was a long list. Hundreds of names. They began the slow, agonizing process of interviewing each one. Meanwhile, David and May Chin appeared on national television. America's Most Wanted. CNN. Good Morning America. May, still recovering physically, looked hollowed out. Dark circles under her eyes. Hands trembling as she held up a photo of Sofia. Please, she whispered into the camera. If you have her, just bring her back. We won't ask questions. We just want our baby home. David couldn't speak. He tried. His mouth opened but nothing came out. He just sat there staring at the camera, silently begging. Eric, 7 years old, stayed with relatives. He kept asking when Sofia was coming home. Nobody knew how to answer him. The media dubbed it the Vanishing Angel case. It dominated headlines for weeks. And then, slowly, the story faded. Seattle General Hospital became a symbol of violated safety. Parents with newborns in the maternity ward demanded immediate transfers to other hospitals. Some refused to let their babies out of their sight, even during medical procedures. Nurses found themselves watched with suspicion. The hospital administrator held a press conference, promising enhanced security measures, but the damage was done. Within weeks, maternity wards across the Pacific Northwest implemented sweeping changes. Electronic ankle monitors for every newborn, tiny LoJack bracelets that triggered alarms if a baby was carried past a certain threshold, stricter badge verification for staff, visitor logs with photo IDs required, locked nurseries with keypad access only. It was all reactive. All too late for Sofia Chen. The abduction sent shockwaves through Seattle's parenting community. Mothers clutched their babies tighter in public. Fathers took unpaid leave to stay home during the first weeks of their children's lives. Strangers eyed each other with paranoia in hospital hallways. Churches held candlelight vigils. Volunteers distributed missing person flyers with Sofia's face, her distinctive mismatched eyes staring out from every telephone pole, every grocery store bulletin board, every gas station window. Psychics emerged, offering visions. A woman in Spokane claimed Sofia was alive, being raised by a couple in eastern Washington. The FBI followed up. Nothing. Online forums, still in their infancy in 1995, buzzed with theories. Some blamed the hospital for lax security. Others speculated about black market adoption rings. A few cruel voices suggested the parents were somehow involved, that maybe May Chin had postpartum depression and staged the abduction. Detective Karen Delgado, the lead investigator, publicly shut down that theory. The Chens are victims, she said firmly in a press conference. Anyone suggesting otherwise needs to examine their own conscience. But the whispers persisted. As weeks turned to months, the vigils stopped. The flyers faded and peeled away in the rain. The news cycle moved on to other tragedies. Seattle collectively exhaled, tried to forget, tried to feel safe again. But the case left a scar. Every parent who gave birth at Seattle General after November 1995 knew the story. Nurses still talked about it in hushed tones during night shifts. The empty bassinet haunted the hospital's reputation for years. And the Chin family? They never stopped looking. Even when everyone else moved on, they kept searching. Kept hoping. Kept believing that somewhere out there, their baby girl with the unforgettable eyes was still alive. Detective Karen Delgado had a daughter exactly Sofia Chen's age. Born 3 weeks apart. Same hospital, different floor. Delgado had taken maternity leave in August 1995, returned to work in October. When Sofia disappeared in November, Delgado requested the case immediately. Her captain hesitated. Karen, you sure? You just had a baby. This one's going to be brutal. Delgado didn't blink. That's exactly why I need it. For the first year, Delgado worked Sofia's case like it was her own daughter. She interviewed 347 people. She tracked down every woman in King County who'd suffered a pregnancy loss in the previous 2 years. She flew to Oregon, California, Idaho, following leads that evaporated on contact. Her partner, Detective Frank Huang, watched her spiral. Delgado stopped sleeping. She kept Sofia's photo taped to her dashboard, glanced at it at red lights. She'd sit in her car after shifts, staring at the image, those mismatched eyes, that tiny face, and feel a crushing weight in her chest. I kept thinking, Delgado later told a reporter, she's out there, right now, learning to walk, saying her first words. And she has no idea she's stolen. Huang tried to keep her grounded. Karen, you're going to burn out. We're doing everything we can. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. The FBI eventually scaled back their involvement. Other cases demanded resources. The trail had gone cold. But Delgado refused to let go. She kept the case file in her car trunk. She called May and David Chen every few months, even when there was nothing new to report, just to remind them someone still cared. Her marriage strained. Her husband found her awake at 3 a.m., surrounded by case files, staring at security footage for the 1,000th time. You're obsessed, he said quietly. I made her a promise, Delgado whispered, not looking up. I told her I'd find her. Huang retired in 2005. Before he left, he pulled Delgado aside. You've done everything humanly possible. You need to let this go. Delgado transferred to homicide in 2008. New cases, new challenges. But she kept Sofia's file. Every year on November 14th, she'd take it out, read through the reports, study the photos. By 2010, the case was officially cold. The Chens had moved to a smaller house. May rarely spoke about Sofia anymore. David's hair had gone completely gray. Eric was in college, trying to build a life separate from the tragedy that defined his childhood. Delgado retired in 2014. On her last day, she took Sofia's file home. She couldn't bear to leave it in storage, forgotten in some dusty warehouse. I'm not giving up, she told her husband. I just need to find a different way. She never expected that way would come from a 21-year-old scrolling through Instagram on his birthday. But sometimes miracles happen in the most unexpected places. Between 1995 and 2015, the Chens chased ghosts. Every time a young girl with heterochromia appeared in news coverage, they called the police. Every time someone claimed to have seen Sofia, they investigated. Every time hope flickered, it was extinguished just as quickly. In 1998, a teacher in Portland spotted a student with mismatched eyes and remembered Sofia's case from a true crime documentary. She contacted authorities. The Chens drove 4 hours through pouring rain, hearts pounding. The girl's parents produced a birth certificate, hospital records, photos from infancy. Not Sofia. May cried the entire drive home. In 2002, a woman in Vancouver, just across the Canadian border, reached out after seeing Sofia's case featured on Unsolved Mysteries. Her adopted daughter matched Sofia's age, had similar features, and one of her eyes was slightly lighter than the other. The Chens arranged a meeting. DNA test was conducted. Negative. May stopped answering the phone after that. Too many false hopes. Too many dead ends. Each one felt like losing Sofia all over again. In 2007, a psychic contacted them. She was different, she insisted. She'd solved cases before. She'd had a vision of Sofia, now 12 years old, living in Southern California under the name Emma, raised by a wealthy couple who'd adopted her through illegal channels. David paid for a private investigator. The PI tracked down 3 girls named Emma in the Los Angeles area matching the age description. All had heterochromia. None were Sofia. David never told May how much that investigation cost. Some debts were financial. Others were spiritual. By 2010, the Chens had stopped hoping. Not consciously. Not in a single moment of decision. It was more like a slow surrender, a quiet acceptance that Sofia was gone. Truly gone. They held a memorial service. Not a funeral, they didn't have a body, didn't want to think in those terms. But a letting go. A ritual of grief. Close friends attended. Eric, now 22, read a poem he'd written about a sister he couldn't remember. May packed away Sofia's baby clothes. The tiny shoes she'd never worn. The stuffed animals that had waited in an empty nursery for 15 years. She donated most of it. Kept one outfit, a pale yellow onesie Sofia had worn the day before the abduction. She folded it carefully, placed it in a memory box, and put it in the back of her closet. David stopped checking the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children database. He stopped Googling Sofia's name. He stopped torturing himself with what ifs. They tried to move forward. It felt like betrayal. Eric felt it most acutely. He'd grown up in the shadow of a sister he barely remembered. His parents' grief was a third presence in every room, silent and suffocating. He loved them. But he also resented Sofia sometimes. Resented the ghost that consumed his childhood. He never said it out loud. But on his 21st birthday, when he opened Instagram and typed a single word into the search bar, part of him was still looking for the sister he'd lost before he could know her. November 14, 2015. Eric Chen's 21st birthday. 20 years to the day since Sofia disappeared. His parents didn't celebrate on this date. They never had. It was always bittersweet. Another year older for Eric, another year gone for Sofia. Another year of wondering if she was alive, if she was safe, if she even knew she was missing. Eric woke up that morning in his childhood bedroom. He was home from the University of Washington for the weekend. The house felt heavy the way it always did on November 14th. His mother had made breakfast but barely touched her own plate. His father sat at the table reading the newspaper in silence, the way he did when he was trying not to think about something. Eric retreated to his room after breakfast. He lay on his bed, staring at his phone, scrolling mindlessly through social media. Friends posting birthday wishes. Memes. News headlines. The usual digital noise. But his mind kept drifting back to Sofia. He'd done this before, searched for her online. Hundreds of times over the years. He'd Google her name. Check missing persons databases. Scroll through Facebook profiles of women named Sofia Chen, hoping one of them would somehow be her. It never led anywhere. But today felt different. Maybe it was turning 21. Maybe it was the symmetry of 20 years. Maybe it was just impulse. He opened Instagram. He'd searched for Sofia Chen before on the platform. Nothing ever came up that matched. This time he tried something different. He typed, heterochromia. It was a long shot. But Sofia's eyes had always been her most distinctive feature. If she was out there, if she was alive, if she'd ever posted a photo of herself online, maybe, just maybe, she'd tagged it. Maybe she'd talked about her unique eyes. The search brought up thousands of results. People with different colored eyes were everywhere on Instagram. Models, influencers, everyday people proud of their genetic quirk. Eric scrolled through dozens of profiles. Blue and brown eyes. Green and hazel. Every possible combination. He was about to give up. And then he saw her. Username at Isabella. Reyes 94. The profile photo stopped his heart. A young woman, early 20s, smiling at the camera. Her left eye was brown. Her right eye was blue-green. Not just similar to Sofia's condition. Identical. Eric's hands started shaking. He clicked on the profile. She lived in Vancouver, British Columbia. Just 2 hours north of Seattle. Her bio said she was a nursing student at the University of British Columbia. Her feed showed a normal life. Coffee shops with friends, study sessions in the library, beach photos from English Bay, selfies in scrubs during clinical rotations. But it was her face that made Eric's chest tighten. She looked exactly like his mother. The same delicate bone structure. The same smile. The same way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she laughed. And those eyes, those impossible, unmistakable eyes. Eric took screenshots. His hands were trembling so badly he almost dropped his phone. He ran downstairs. Mom. Dad. You need to see this right now. David looked up from his newspaper, annoyed at first. May turned from the sink where she was washing dishes. They both saw the look on Eric's face. What's wrong? May asked. Eric held out his phone. I think I found her. May dried her hands slowly, walked over. David stood up. They both looked at the screen. The Instagram profile. The photos. The girl with 2 different colored eyes. May's knees buckled. David caught her. She stared at the phone, her mouth opening and closing, no sound coming out. That's her, May finally whispered. Oh my God. That's my baby. David was more cautious. They'd been through this before. False leads. Dead ends. Heartbreak. But even he couldn't deny it. The resemblance was uncanny. The eyes were unmistakable. Heterochromia iridum affects less than 1% of the population. The specific combination of Sofia's brown and blue-green eyes was even rarer. The girl in the photos was the right age. She lived close to Seattle. And she looked like she could be May Chen's daughter. Eric's heart was pounding. Should I message her? May nodded, unable to speak. Eric opened the direct message function. His finger hovered over the keyboard. What do you even say? How do you tell someone they might be a stolen child? He typed, this might sound completely crazy, but I think you might be my sister. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. And then they waited. 2 hours felt like 2 years. Eric paced around the house. May sat on the couch, staring at nothing. David called Detective Karen Delgado, now retired, and told her what they'd found. Delgado said she'd make some calls. But she warned them to be careful. To hope but not too much. At 6:47 p.m., Eric's phone buzzed. A message from Isabella. Reyes 94. What do you mean? Isabella Reyes had always known she was adopted. Her mother, Claire Reyes, had been upfront about it from the beginning. Isabella grew up hearing the story. Claire had adopted her as an infant in 1995 through a private adoption in Seattle. The process had been quick, handled by a social worker who specialized in connecting birth mothers with adoptive parents. Claire was a single woman in her early 30s at the time, a nurse working at Vancouver General Hospital. She'd wanted a child desperately but couldn't have one biologically. The adoption had seemed like a miracle. Isabella never questioned it. Why would she? She had baby photos. She had adoption paperwork, though admittedly the documents were sparse. She had a birth certificate listing Claire Reyes as her mother. She had a childhood full of love and stability. Claire was a good mother. Devoted. Present. She worked long shifts at the hospital but always made time for Isabella. She attended every school event, every parent-teacher conference. She taught Isabella to be kind, to work hard, to help others. That's why Isabella had chosen nursing, following in her mother's footsteps. But there had always been small, nagging questions. Why were her adoption records so thin? Why did Claire never talk about the social worker who'd facilitated the adoption? Why were there no details about her biological parents? Not even basic medical history. Whenever Isabella asked, Claire would deflect. It was a closed adoption. That's just how things were done back then. Isabella accepted it. Until Eric Chen's message arrived. This might sound completely crazy, but I think you might be my sister. Isabella stared at the message for a full minute. Her first instinct was that it was spam. Or a scam. Or some weird catfishing attempt. But something made her respond. What do you mean? The conversation that followed changed her entire life. Eric sent her photos. A baby girl taken from Seattle General Hospital in 1995. A family, David, May and 7-year-old Eric Chen, standing in front of a modest house in Seattle's Beacon Hill neighborhood. News articles about the abduction. Missing persons posters. And then Eric sent a close-up photo of baby Sofia Chen. Isabella zoomed in on the image. The baby's eyes. One brown. One blue-green. Exactly like hers. She felt something cold settle in her stomach. Eric explained everything. The hospital abduction. The 20-year search. The distinctive heterochromia that made Sofia unforgettable. The fact that Isabella was exactly Sofia's age, lived just across the border from Seattle, and looked identical to May Chen. Isabella sat in her apartment, staring at her phone, feeling the ground shift beneath her. She called Claire. Mom, we need to talk. Right now. Claire heard the tone in her voice. What's wrong, sweetheart? Where did you really get me? Silence on the other end of the line. Mom, I need the truth. Was my adoption legal? Claire started crying. I don't know, she whispered. Oh God, Isabella, I don't know. That's when Isabella knew. She'd been stolen. Her entire life, every memory, every birthday, every moment of happiness had been built on a crime. She wasn't Isabella Reyes. She was Sofia Chen. A girl who'd been ripped away from her real family before she could even remember them. Within 24 hours, Isabella agreed to meet the Chens. Within 48 hours, she took a DNA test. 3 days later, the results came back. 99.99% match. Isabella Reyes was Sofia Chen. And the woman who'd raised her had known all along. The moment Sofia's identity was confirmed, everything became a criminal investigation. The FBI and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police formed a joint task force. Claire Reyes became the primary suspect in a 20-year-old kidnapping case. Her home was searched. Her phone records subpoenaed. Her entire life put under a microscope. Detectives started digging into Claire's past. In 1994, Claire Reyes had been pregnant. She'd carried the baby to 7 months before suffering a devastating stillbirth. Medical records showed she'd fallen into severe postpartum depression afterward. Friends and co-workers recalled her becoming withdrawn, obsessed with the idea of motherhood, desperate to try again. But Claire couldn't get pregnant again. Doctors told her it was unlikely she'd ever carry another child to term. That's when the obsession began. In early 1995, Claire started talking about adoption. She told colleagues at Vancouver General Hospital that she was working with a private agency in Seattle. She showed them paperwork, official-looking documents with agency letterheads. She talked about a birth mother who'd chosen her to raise the baby. But when detectives tracked down the agency, it didn't exist. The address was a vacant office building. The phone number was disconnected. The social worker Claire had named was a fabrication. Claire had lied about everything. But here's where the investigation hit a complication. Claire Reyes didn't match the physical description of the woman on the Seattle General Hospital security footage. The suspect in the 1995 video appeared younger, thinner, more athletic. Claire was heavier set, older looking with a different build entirely. So if Claire didn't physically take Sofia from the hospital, who did? Detectives found her. Angela Moreno, Claire's younger sister. In 1995, Angela had been 28 years old, living in Seattle, working as a medical assistant at a clinic in Tacoma. She matched the suspect description perfectly. Slim build, dark hair. Approximately 5'6". Healthcare background. Agents tracked Angela down in Guadalajara, Mexico, where she'd been living under an assumed name for the past 15 years. When confronted, she cracked within hours. She confessed everything. Claire had begged her for help. After the stillbirth, Claire had become suicidal. She told Angela she couldn't live without a child. She pleaded with her sister to find a way, any way, to make it happen. Angela, desperate to save her sister's life, agreed to the unthinkable. She spent weeks planning. She studied Seattle General Hospital's layout, learned the security protocols, identified the weak points. She purchased scrubs from a medical supply store. She forged a hospital badge using equipment from her clinic. She mapped out escape routes. On November 14, 1995, Angela walked into Seattle General Hospital during the afternoon shift change, the busiest, most chaotic time. She moved through the maternity ward like she belonged there. Nobody questioned her. She took Sofia Chen from her bassinet and walked out. The entire operation took 24 minutes. Angela drove Sofia across the Canadian border that same night. Border security in 1995 was far less stringent than it would become post 9/11. She handed the baby to Claire in a parking lot in Vancouver. Claire paid Angela $20,000 in cash. Angela disappeared to Mexico within the week. She'd been running ever since, terrified that one day the truth would catch up. And it finally had. By the time detectives arrested her in 2016, Angela Moreno was 49 years old, exhausted from 2 decades of looking over her shoulder. She waived extradition immediately. She said she was ready to face justice. Claire Reyes, confronted with her sister's confession, maintained she believed the adoption was legal. But prosecutors didn't believe her. The evidence suggested Claire had orchestrated everything: the plan, the payment, the cover story. Both women were charged with kidnapping, conspiracy, and fraud. The case made international headlines. But the hardest part wasn't the legal battle. It was what came next. The trial began in February 2017. Angela Moreno pleaded guilty to kidnapping and conspiracy charges. In exchange for her cooperation and testimony against Claire, she received a reduced sentence of 15 years in federal prison. During her testimony, Angela broke down multiple times. She described Claire's desperation after the stillbirth, the months of pleading, the moment she finally agreed to help. "I thought I was saving my sister's life," Angela said through tears. "I thought she'd die if I didn't do this. But I was wrong. I stole a child. I destroyed a family. And I've lived with that guilt every single day for 20 years. Claire Reyes went to trial. Her defense argued she was a victim too, a grieving mother manipulated by her sister, a woman who genuinely believed the adoption was legal. But the prosecution presented damning evidence. Bank records showing the $20,000 cash withdrawal. Testimony from colleagues proving Claire had lied about the adoption agency. The fake paperwork she'd created to support her story. Most damaging was testimony from the Chens. May Chen took the stand and described 20 years of grief. 20 birthdays she'd spent wondering if Sofia was alive. 20 Christmases with an empty chair at the table. 20 years of a pain so profound it had nearly destroyed her marriage, her relationship with Eric, her will to live. David Chen spoke about watching his son grow up in the shadow of a missing sister. About the guilt of not being in the nursery that day. About the nights he'd woken up screaming, dreaming that he'd stopped the woman in scrubs but woke to find it was just another nightmare. Eric testified about growing up as the forgotten child in a family consumed by grief. About feeling guilty for existing when Sofia didn't. About the complicated emotions of finding his sister and realizing she'd lived a happy life while his family suffered. And then Sofia took the stand. She'd legally changed her name to Sofia Chen Reyes, honoring both her identities. She spoke quietly, carefully, trying to balance impossible truths. She said she loved Claire. That Claire had been a good mother. That she didn't want to see her imprisoned. But she also acknowledged the crime. She'd been stolen. Her biological family had suffered unimaginable pain. Justice had to mean something. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Claire Reyes was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. 1 year for every year she'd kept Sofia from her real family. The courtroom was silent when the sentence was read. Claire collapsed, sobbing. Sofia, sitting with the Chens, cried too. After the trial, Sofia visited Claire in prison. The conversation was private, but witnesses said both women were in tears. Forgiveness is complicated. Claire had committed a terrible crime. But she'd also been the only mother Sofia had ever known. Sofia slowly began rebuilding her relationship with the Chens. She visited Seattle every few weeks. She had dinners with May and David. She went to baseball games with Eric. It was awkward at first. 2 decades couldn't be erased overnight. But they tried. May said in an interview, "I have my daughter back. But I also lost 20 years. I'll never hold her as a baby again. I'll never see her first steps, hear her first words. That grief doesn't disappear just because she's home." Detective Karen Delgado attended the sentencing. She finally closed the case file she'd carried for 20 years. "I kept my promise," she said quietly. "I found her." The Sofia Chen case became one of the most famous solved cold cases in recent history. It's a story about impossible odds. About a family that refused to give up, even when everyone else had moved on. About a detective who carried a case file in her car for 2 decades. About a 21-year-old who typed 7 letters into a search bar and found his sister. But it's also a story about moral complexity. Sofia Chen Reyes was stolen. That's an undeniable fact. She was ripped away from her biological family before she could remember them. The crime destroyed the Chens for 20 years. But Sofia was also raised in love. Claire Reyes, despite her crime, was a devoted mother. Sofia had a happy childhood. She was encouraged, supported, given every opportunity to thrive. Does that excuse the kidnapping? Absolutely not. But it complicates the narrative of pure villainy. Claire wasn't a monster. She was a broken woman who made a monstrous decision. And Sofia was left to reconcile those two truths, that the woman who'd loved her most had also committed an unforgivable crime. The case also highlighted how technology has transformed cold case investigations. In 1995, a stolen baby could vanish without a trace. But in 2015, a single Instagram photo changed everything. Social media, for all its problems, reunited a family. Eric Chen's search was both methodical and miraculous. He tried everything over the years: databases, Google searches, Facebook profiles. But it was the specificity of searching heterochromia on Instagram that made the difference. He wasn't looking for a name. He was looking for a genetic signature. And he found it. Today, Sofia Chen Reyes is 29 years old. She works as a nurse at Vancouver General Hospital, the same hospital where Claire once worked. She visits her biological family in Seattle regularly. She's built a relationship with May, David, and Eric, though she admits it's still complicated. She also visits Claire Reyes in prison once a year. The relationship is fractured but not severed. Forgiveness, Sofia says, is a process, not a destination. May and David Chen say they've found peace, though the scars remain. They celebrate Sofia's birthday now, not as a day of mourning, but as a reminder that sometimes, against impossible odds, miracles happen. Eric Chen, now 36, says finding Sofia was the most important thing he's ever done. But he also acknowledges the strange grief of it, getting his sister back but realizing they'd missed 2 decades together. The woman in scrubs who walked out of Seattle General Hospital in 1995 was caught. Angela Moreno is serving her sentence. Claire Reyes won't be eligible for parole until 2037. But the emotional fallout of that 24-minute crime will ripple through 2 families for the rest of their lives. Some wounds don't fully heal. Some questions don't have clean answers. But Sofia Chen is alive. She knows who she is. And for a family who spent 20 years in the dark, that's everything. As Detective Karen Delgado said on the day the case closed, cold cases don't always end happy. But when they do, you remember why you never gave up. This case reminds us that truth has a way of surfacing, even after decades of silence. Technology, persistence, and love can accomplish what seems impossible. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. We bring you the most compelling solved and unsolved cold cases every single week. Your support means everything. And let me know in the comments, do you think Claire Reyes deserved 20 years in prison, or was she a victim of her own grief? What would you do if you discovered your entire identity was built on a lie? These are complicated questions and I want to hear your perspective. Share this video with someone who loves true crime. Let's keep these stories alive and let's never stop searching for the truth. We'll see you in the next investigation.